Hey, welcome to another episode of Birdsong. I'm your host, Caillou Kiora, and in this episode we have Benjamin Venes joining us. Benjamin Venes is a Melbourne-based medium, healer, and artist. His purpose is to help people discover their own power, strength, and wisdom through compassion, creativity, and spiritual guidance. Benjamin's journey has taken him to India, Nepal, and South-East Asia, where he studied, observed, and experienced the awakening of his own spiritual power. He spent many years dedicated to the disciplines and teachings of psychic ability and mediumship and has provided sound readings for people from all walks of life. He also teaches one-day intensive classes in psychic development, mediumship, and spiritual healing, as well as weekly classes at helping those who have a desire in developing these abilities at a more committed level. Benjamin Venes is also a Reiki Master Teacher. Benjamin's creativity has expressed itself in works of poetry, paintings, and novels, and he says that all works of art are an expression of the self evolving into life. It was a really great time for me to sit down and have this conversation with Benjamin, talking about all things related to the path of mediumship and psychic/intuitive abilities. And I trust you'll find value in this dialogue to carry with you on your own path forward. As I mentioned to you, there are a number of themes that I would love to explore with you and have you speak on, such as the path of mediumship, what psychic abilities are and how to develop them, spiritual healing and guidance, alongside other related topics. However, to begin our conversation, I would love to invite you to share some of your musings or reflections on your relationship to the sacred, or to honoring the sacred, and what the sacred means to you, not just through a conceptual lens, but on a day-to-day experiential level. So please take it away, Benjamin, with that invitation.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you. Well, it's the soul, and that's what you're asking about. So many years ago, when I was trying to find my way in this world and didn't know how to, it took a long time for me to find any balance whatsoever. And part of that need for balance was, one, discovering who I was, but also listening to, I guess, what we call that silence. And in that silence, which is beyond our thought, beyond our need or desire, sits our soul. And it's such a broad term to use, but if we kind of describe it as, a lake meeting an ocean, and one ocean which joins with many, we are a drop in that ocean, and we come from that space, which is consciousness, or however you want to describe it. So when you talk about the sacred, it is that aspect of self, which is soul expressing itself through us. When our soul is ready, we will start to develop in whatever way that works with us. And so for me, it's meditation. And it always has been. And I'm a horrible, undisciplined meditator. So for me, I have to at times work hard to connect in with what we call sacred, which is, we can say God, we can give it anything that we want. The fact that we exist is a miracle. And when we go into that space of sacredness, we realize that, but we realize it through contemplation, excuse me, and reflection. You know, when you look at a flower, I'm looking at beautiful, the nature and flora around here. I'm in the treetops right now. So I'm sitting here looking at the colors and also the energy of the trees that are there. They're as much alive as I am. They have a spirit the same as I do. They have the same evolution or need for evolution as I do. But just because I'm observing them doesn't mean that they're not observing us. So when we move beyond, that's a flower, I'm a human being, into that space of silence, that's the sacredness. So for me, that is either done through meditation, it's done through the work that I do, and at times creativity for me. You know, I'm an author, so I like to write, or I like to pretend I'm an author anyway. And that for me is a less demanding way, because there's no, expectation from anyone else with that. And it allows me to kind of tap into that great unknown, which is sacred. And we've got to remember that, you know, all life is a reflection. And if you kind of go, of what? Of God. And then you ask, what is God? A reflection. And that's all it is. So we're kind of discovering from that point of being who we are.
Yeah, I would love to tease this apart with you to a greater degree. And you mentioned one word there, which was consciousness, which I would love to get your views on or your philosophies on
It's
to a greater
so
degree with
good.
consciousness, and what you were speaking about, the kind of this like interconnectivity and relationships between mind, between energy, between each other. And it may be evident to you, but I'm asking this to have you start to establish maybe a bit of a framework of how you
Sure.
perceive and interact with this path of mediumship and engaging with psychic abilities, because I feel as though maybe to understand or to contextualize mediumship and psychic abilities in a well-rounded or perhaps mature manner, I feel as though it could be a
Sure.
worthwhile thing to lay forth an understanding of the mechanisms of consciousness or reality and how mediumship and psychic abilities emerge from that.
Sure. So first we can look at understanding what psychic means, what psychic development or ability is, which is just the extra senses, and then look at mediumship.
Mm-hmm.
Then with those understandings and levels of awareness, we can start to explore our own consciousness. Okay, so we'll go from there. So
Yeah, great.
the whole understanding of our psychic abilities, everyone is psychic or intuitive. So I really don't like the word psychic. I took it off my website for years because it just seems so corny. I didn't like it. It's intuition, but everyone understands the word psychic. So it's there.
Mm-hmm.
And quite simply put, it is being able to connect in with senses that are not of the physical, and allows us to feel in an extrasensory way. It allows us to hear in an extrasensory way, and also to see. When we first try to discover that, because we're going into uncharted territories, or we're dealing with something that doesn't seem tangible, we need structure with it. So for the basics of it, have you ever walked into a room and there's two people there, and you just know that they've had a fight? You can just feel it. You feel the energy through the roof. Especially for women, they can tell where there's a creepy guy or his energy is not quite right, because they'll turn and look. Their intuition or their feeling is really there. If you've had the chills, which is starting to go off already, kind of move through your body. So you might even find today, because spirit would be around, you might find that you've got a warm room, but it gets cold, and that's the presence of spirit around you just entering the room. Okay, so those little things give you an understanding of your own intuition. Sometimes they can be through dreams as well. You might have when we're dreaming, we are dealing with our subconscious. So that's always interesting to note and to be aware of, not to get too carried away. But sometimes people will have dreams known as precognition, where they dream something before it happens,
Mm-hmm.
or they're aware of it. And very simple things like, when you think of someone and they call you. And that's because we are connected. We're actually, even though physically not in the same space, we're not limited by time and space on an energy level. And that's why sometimes when people, get a little bit confused as to whether to come and see me in person or remotely, I always say there's no difference, because there's no limit to spirit. It's a thought-based reality. So the psychic side of things is what you feel, what you hear at times, or the thoughts that can move through your mind, what you know to be true, and what you see. And then we have to understand that. Do we see things as they are, or do they need to be interpreted? So we teach people a language, the language of intuition, just like you would if you studied French or Italian. So you start off with the very basics and expand from there. That's the psychic side of things, which really has everything to do with the physical. Okay. When we go into the mediumship side of things, we're connecting in with those in the spirit world. So it is our loved ones who basically are not in a physical body anymore, but are living in a world that is just as real, and probably more real and more vibrant than us. What the spirit will do is they lower their energy and vibration to connect with us. A medium will reach out with their mind, reach out with their energy, blend with those in the spirit world, blend the minds or blend the consciousnesses together, and allow the spirit individual to impress on a thought level through the medium's mind. Okay. So as the spirit starts to impress upon the medium will start to allow that information to come through, where they start to talk about their life. They start to talk about experiences they've had with their loved one, to provide proof of survival of the soul. And that's what mediumship's about. So mediumship is always about that bridge between the two worlds to allow that love to reunite. And people always worry about their loved ones in spirit. You don't have to worry about your loved ones in spirit. They're in, what we call heaven, because there is no physical ailments. There's no physical pain. So for people that have had mental health issues, I mentioned people with schizophrenia, they step into spirit worlds. That's no longer there. People that have been bedridden, or perhaps have had such people that are, maybe MS, trapped in their body. You wouldn't wish that upon anyone. When they step into the worlds of spirit, they go through a space of healing where they're brought out of that vibration of believing they have to stay there. So that no longer exists. And then from that, we go and explore in greater levels out of time, in greater levels of awareness and consciousness. Okay, so when you're dealing with people in the spirit world, you can have loved ones come through, you can have spirit teachers come through, which will be a higher level of consciousness, which they've trained or studied to do, so specialists in that field. And over time, you'll find that most mediums, once they develop to a certain degree, they'll start to bring through the philosophical aspects, which is us understanding who we are on a soul level, what life is all about. The big question, and I love to ask it, and I always say, you could have asked me 10 years ago what things were. And I'm like, this is what it is. This is how it is. This is exactly what happens. Now I started when I was very, very young, exploring consciousness, the spirit world, everything. And now I'd go, I don't know. And why I say that is because we don't. Yeah, we don't. If we have an awareness of self, which I guess is beyond the awareness of I, or the creation of Benjamin since he was born, which is to a certain degree a conditioned identity. Beyond that, I believe is consciousness, and I believe consciousness does not have a limitation. So how does consciousness evolve? How does consciousness communicate? It communicates on a telepathic level, so mind to mind. So there are a lot of people that believe that there aren't other life forms in the universe. Well, there are, and they exist. And those consciousnesses would exist in dimensions far beyond ours, probably far beyond our spirit worlds, but they would still try to bring in communication to help us evolve, but not interfere. Just like I guess, have you ever seen a nature documentary where the individuals had a favorite, animal, and that they can't interfere though? And the animal may, have hardship and they may even, not live, but they can't interfere. I believe that's what happens with higher beings and higher consciousnesses. Okay, so what's happening on the planet is the planet itself, which is obviously an entity which has a consciousness. I always say to people, imagine, you talk about sacredness, imagine the sacredness of what we call our planet, what we call Gaia. And her, because it is a mother, it is a womb, how evolved that consciousness would be to have everything grow from it, to allow other life forms to grow and evolve from it, even if those life forms are destructive for it, which is pretty amazing. Yeah. So, amazing. Consciousness, I mean, it is one of those things. It is the aspect of ourself that true consciousness does come from our spirit, which is indestructible, which comes from what we call the Great Spirit or God. That is our true consciousness. Okay, so we do reach a certain point in the spirit worlds where we would leave identity behind and blend into consciousness. Pure consciousness.
How do you make the distinction between, and this is getting into semantics here, but I'm curious to know how you define the difference between spirit and soul. How do you see that?
Yeah, that's really cool. Spirit, as in when spirit come through, or as in our own spirit?
Well, that's great. I would love for you to kind of tease apart those definitions as well. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I always say, it's not that it is my opinion, but I say it's just my opinion. So please, I always say to people, don't think it is how it is. And again, 10 years ago, it would have been, this is how it is. Now I'm like, we'll see when we get there.
Yeah.
When
Well,
you have
sorry to just before you were going to get started, I was just going to point out the importance of having these types of conversations as well, because as you said, even the word psychic can carry so much baggage or so many connotations to it
yeah,
that I think they're to lay some foundation to what it is that we actually mean by the words that we're using, so we can get on the same page. If we hold different meanings between different words, we can be like, oh, okay, this is what you mean. I can see things from that perspective now, rather than hold my own kind of biased viewpoint by still latching onto my own designated meaning to a particular word.
yeah, absolutely. And I always
Yeah.
say to people that, when they're coming into study, and I have a lot of intelligent people that do come in, a lot of educated people, a lot of people that are in the alternative healing fields. And I always say to people, look, I only speak from my level of awareness, but a lot of it is coming from the spirit world. And it's with being with the spirit world, working with them day in, day out for years.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to sometimes unravel people's ideas of how things are and have a very grounded approach to it. Because when we talk about our soul, our spirit, the spirit worlds, our own evolution, it's very similar to nature, and everything has a cycle. But the spirit world is such an intelligence, as we are such an intelligence, because we bring ourselves into this world, which is absolutely amazing. Now, when we talk about the spirit world coming through, they're what's known as a discarnate spirit, which means that they're not incarnated or not in the body. Okay. And so that would be your loved ones in spirit, uncle, aunt, grandmother, grandfather. So they hold a certain vibration of their personality. So they've got their likes, their dislikes. If they smoked, I would see cigarette smoke around me. If they pass with a heart attack, I'll experience that heart attack. If someone comes through and unfortunately they pass of their own hand or take themselves into the spirit worlds, which they don't get stuck, there's no judgment, they pass straight into spirit, by the way. I will feel that. So you can pick up on the ailments that people have, and physically that can affect you. And that can affect you with your mind, with your emotions, and with your body. So there's a lot of people, and I guess over the last 10 years or so, a lot of people that have really wanted to jump on the bandwagon of mediumship being a bit of a trend or a fashion. So a lot of people would say, oh, I want to be a medium and I want to be well known. And I would say to both of those things, why and why? Because it's not a path that is always a fun ride. It's difficult. And it can be a very lonely and personal journey, because when it's all said and done, it's you in the spirit world doing the work. So when spirit comes through, you will pick up on their ailments, you'll pick up on their personality. That's a good indicator that you know that they're around. And at times it will change the way that I communicate. So if someone was cheeky, I'll start being cheeky. If someone was serious, I'll become more serious. At times you can literally take on all their attributes. So if someone was fidgety, I'll become fidgety. If someone had an issue with their eye, my eyes will go blurry. Okay, if someone had a stutter, I may take on that stutter. So imagine for people who are very natural mediums, when they first step into this field, when they realize all that influence around them isn't quite theirs, it changes their world and it makes it a lot easier. Okay, so we've got to learn that structuring in mediumship. That's how you know that spirit is around. Our soul, a really basic way. We say our soul or higher self, which there are different definitions for that, but it's probably easy just to say soul at the moment. If you go into that space of listening to your mind, listening to your thoughts, and then you go between those thoughts, or you let your mind kind of drift past that into that space of silence, you will feel an expansiveness and a vastness that is there. And that vastness is our soul. Does our soul have an identity? Yeah, it does. It does. Does our soul need us to evolve? Yes. So we have our spirit. So if you imagine the sun, you imagine a ray of light coming off that sun. That's our spirit coming off the Godhead. And again, these are just terms. As that slows down and moves through a different space of being or dimension, and again, we're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years, our time that this would take. As it slows down its vibration, it needs a vehicle in order to move through certain vibrations or lower vibrations. So therefore the soul is created. Okay, the soul is also created so it can have spiritual experience or evolve within the universe So as that soul starts to descend down to this level, which is the lowest level, so which is really weird for us to understand. This is probably the lowest dimension that our consciousness is going to experience. That's why it can be heavy and hard. That's why we've got people of all different types, if we put it that way, thrown together, or we've got a mixed bag. Our soul needs a vehicle, which is our physical body, in order to experience the earthly life. Now, why we age, apart from disease, but the vibration of our soul is so powerful, is so strong, that our body cannot withstand it beyond what we'd say is 100 years. So that should give you some understanding. So people always ask, well, what's the purpose of that life? Well, sometimes when we're thrown into the depths of the fire, and if we look at that in terms of vibration in the earth plane, our soul throws itself or incarnates upon the earth plane in order to really learn the heaviness of life, to learn all the vast contrast of human emotion and human life. And that allows that soul to ascend probably higher, or to ascend to a greater level of evolution. We're very limited in the way that we see it, because we see it as up and down, don't we? And we know if we point up, well, where's up in terms of our planet? So it kind of gets rid of that, doesn't it? So we always say up and down, but if we understand it in terms of experience, our soul needs experience in order to evolve, and that's why we're here.
Yeah,
and it can live multiple lives at once.
Yeah, I would love for you to, when you say it can live multiple lives at once, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, and again, there's two schools of thought, kind of UK-based mediumship, known as spiritualists, which are brilliant teachers. They will, and which is a religion, and I definitely don't resonate with any religion. I do resonate with, always say, my thing is, guiding people into the power of their soul. As corny as that sounded, is, there's no authority. There isn't. We're our own authority. When we go into the spirit worlds, there's no one judging us. We make that call from that higher level of consciousness, which it is. So in terms of the potential, and my point being with the more traditional English mediums, is they don't believe in reincarnation. Okay, so they believe we're here for one life. That's it. That's a possibility. I always say we'll find out when we get there. I believe, and I was always taught, that we're living from a soul perspective, multiple lives at the same time. The soul itself is outside of time, isn't it? So everything's happening now. So past, present, and future. Just like if you had a Zoom room and you had multiple personalities, I hope you don't have multiple personalities. You do not, by the way. If you had multiple people on there, cheeky. That would be kind of the definition of the soul evolving, because the soul needs the experience to evolve at the same time, past, present, and future. It would only be from, I guess, our own individual perspective that we look at reincarnation in that way, as a linear thing. We see everything in a linear way. So the potential is our soul is given the chance to evolve, is given the chance to grow on this planet, and potentially others as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. And to preface what I'm about to say, I am not a scientist by any means whatsoever, but I have not studied anything like quantum physics extensively, but some of these spiritual philosophies, they do find parallels when we are talking about, or when I have read about things like the multidimensionality of string theory and some of these kind of quantum physics ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. When you go to the core of it, we come from empty space, and that's very hard for us to comprehend. It's very hard, but
yeah. One of the questions, and you kind of alluded to this earlier, and now that I'm thinking about it, it's a funny question to ask. And the question is, how long have you been on this path for? Because the answer could be taken in so many different ways. It's like, I've always been on this path, from one different perspective. But perhaps another question would be like, what age did you discover? Even this question's a bit strange. Discover your psychic skills, because intuition is kind of something that perhaps we develop over time. But I guess as a follow-up question to that, was there a point where you were somewhat where you were aware of this paradigm, but you were somewhat skeptical about this work and this path? And was there one particular experience or a series of particular experiences that swung the pendulum in the other direction, which proved beyond a shadow of a doubt to you and your discerning mind that, you know, the psychic and mediumship abilities that you were cultivating were legitimate?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I'd agree that I always say I'm the most skeptical medium. As soon as someone tells me they're a psychic medium, I'm like, prove it.
Sure.
And I've had readings with students who have blown me away. I've had readings with good mediums that have blown me away. I've had readings with mediums that are incredibly well known on the planet, and I've sat there and raised an eyebrow and gone, So it doesn't really matter whether someone is known. It's the quality of their skill set and their training that kind of comes into that. For me, it was, the psychic side of things. I always felt things deeply, but as you grow, you don't understand that. So I did without going into it, because I still have family members who are living, so I don't want to be disrespectful to them, but I did come from at times a chaotic upbringing. And with that slight chaos, I shut down, being a very, very sensitive soul. So I wouldn't talk. I was very, very quiet, became very, very shy. Was very good at football, probably should have gone and played at a higher level, but confidence was shattered, absolutely shattered. So, and I would have, in all honesty, played the victim with that for many years. So I talk about being off track. When we say spirituality, I always say to people, I can really help you because I've failed more than most people. And that failure led to a lot of self-discovery and understanding, okay, which is self-responsibility. What do you choose in this life? Okay, so that will always come up for people. The psychic side of things, was always there, always felt that very deeply. The mediumship side of things, that's probably the more, the energy that had the greatest effect on me, especially in teenagehood. So when people talk about poltergeist activity, usually they've got teenagers, and it's that adolescent energy that's really finding its identity, or the soul it's finding its identity within the auric field of the teenager or adolescent. And that energy itself can be quite powerful, but that's where you can have things start to move in the house and things start to get a bit haywire. So usually if there's teenagers, that won't be spirit, it's their energy. Okay, so literally being quite temperamental. In teenagehood, look, I probably wasn't on track. I was hearing voices. I didn't know what was going on. It was very, very overwhelming for me. I went down the path of numbing that with drugs and alcohol and everything from a younger age, which is the worst thing that you can do. But it was how it was. There was a point where I was probably about 14, and my paternal grandfather, who was in spirit, was behind me. And I was completely aware of it. And I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't understand what I was saying, but I remember yelling out, "I'm not ready yet." And I look back now and I'm like going, oh, wow, there was such awareness at that age that, I know I'm going to do this, but I'm not ready to step into that, because it's different when we talk about it, but when it's real, it can be a little bit destabilizing. So that was kind of the first aspect. I was probably about 14. So from that, I was always interested and always had the intuition from the spirit where, God, I would have no money in the bank. And there was, do you remember the book, The Celestine Prophecy?
Yes, I actually only just read it recently. It had been on my list for many years, but it was only maybe, 9 months, 10 months ago that I finally read it.
Awesome. So that, I'm showing my age here, that came out back in the day, but it was just to get me thinking about the possibility of, there's more to life than this square box, so to speak. And even little things like going into a bookstore, which I often did, and trying to, and looking at the book and going, no, I can't afford that. I know what money I've got in the bank, that won't go through. And hearing spirit go, just buy the book, just buy the book, just buy the book. And I eventually bought the book and it went through. And I'm like, oh, okay, there's more money in my account. I don't know how that happened. Little things like that nudged me forward until I reached the point that I was trying to write a book, and that book involved a little bit of spirit stuff. And I started interviewing mediums. And as I started to interview mediums, eventually it started to come out where a couple of them went, you could probably step into this field. And I was like, oh, whatever. And there was a gentleman that was a brilliant medium who his wife worked with my sister. And I was working in South Australia at the time, mapping power poles in remote areas. And I'd worked this very weird job to get money to travel. And once a week, he would give me 45 minutes to call him and ask a whole bunch of questions. And for me, it was like, going to see Hogwarts, and I just loved it. So I started upon that. I went traveling to Southeast Asia and to India, and in India, everything began to open up. Not that I'd love to say, gee, I went there and I met this great teacher. No, I went to India and I traveled. That's what I did. I met people along the way who gave me insight. And then I came back and stepped into a meditation class. And even looking at the pamphlet back in the day for the meditation class and thinking, should I do it? And the pamphlet flew off the table and landed down. And I was like, that might be a yes. Mm-hmm. And then from that, I found what's known as a mediumship development group. And I found an individual who became a mentor, very much a big brother and someone I'm good friends with now, but who saved my life, because if I didn't meet him, I wouldn't be here. And not only helped me heal, taught me everything that he does. And so I would be one of the few students that he's had to go on to do exactly what he does, in terms of all the skill sets as well. So yeah, it was probably about 26 years of age that I stepped into that, and I would go to 4 3-hour classes a week. So I was incredibly committed to it. And yeah, I was in. So my skepticism went when I met that individual, and they read me like a book. And it was lovely because I was still at 26, quite shy, single, desperately trying to find a girlfriend, not successfully doing that, and in a room full of women, and he would have such joy singing and verbalizing all my insecurities until they went.
Right.
So yeah, when he brought through a lot of information that was true for me and very week to week, you can't deny that. So yeah. When someone knows exactly what you've been up to, you kind of go, huh? Okay.
And then it continued to blossom from there.
Yeah. It's not, not like the movies. So, would love to say just like the movies, and then we rode off into the sunset. Yeah. No, I still stumbled a bit in life, still worked, corporate jobs, which is weird to think about now, while trying to study mediumship and doing readings on the side. And then probably when I was about 28, 29, stepped into full-time developing, a mediumship business. And, we had a shop in St Kilda in Melbourne. So, kind of think from no money, I think we left with no money, corporate jobs basically, and then had a shop. So that's pretty amazing to be able to do that. And that's kind of what the power of the spirit will do when you're helping people. The manifestations can come in a bit quicker because you're dealing with a higher energy and higher vibration. The counter side to that is if you kind of step off path with it, the fall's a lot greater, because you should know better.
Well, in my earlier life, there is certainly resonance with both of our paths, where I was a very, very sensitive, and I guess I would say intuitive child, being able to pick up on energies very, very easily. But I felt very, very misunderstood. And that kind of feeling of being misunderstood expanded and continued to grow as I started to step into my teenage years. But before stepping into that, I was quite reserved and very, very quiet. But to try and find a sense of who I was, I started exploring different paths and ended up going somewhat down the path of being a rebel, like rebelling from the system and rebelling from, parents and just whatever, whatever that I felt was kind of holding me back. And part of that rebellion showed up in picking up a pair of drumsticks and a skateboard and that kind of thing. And I went down the path of playing drums in pop punk and punk bands for well over a decade. So a lot of that intuitive, sensitive capacity within myself it's almost like it disappeared. It was obviously still in here, but it was so clouded with so many misconceptions and insecurities that it really took many years for me to stumble my way back onto this path that I'm on now and start to recultivate these sensitivities that I know that I had when I was younger. And it's only through being able to reflect now that I can kind of see how many of these threads were popping up when I was younger. But just to share a little bit about my earlier self and the resonances between our journey. But one thing that I wanted to jump back to was the book that you wrote. I'm very curious to know what kind of questions you thought were most important, or that you were most curious about, that you were asking a lot of people that you were interviewing for the book.
Yeah, still writing that book, by the way. So it's a
long time in the
progress.
making, huh?
Don't rush these things, right?
Sure.
So for me, it started off as a kid's book. And I guess I was just experimenting and trying to learn how to write. And then it evolved into, okay, what happens in the spirit world and what is all that about? So, what happens when we cross over, quite literally? And I'd ask those questions. And a lot of the mediums would come through with the same answers. Why are we here? Is there authority? Is there light and dark? What happens? And even weird things, like I still remember I had a dream and experience, and I asked one of the mediums who, God bless him, I was a young kid. He was probably 50 or 60. He's done this for years. He wouldn't want to waste his time doing this. God, for me, if people are asking me questions now all the time, I'd be like, okay, here's a number, go see this person, and it's not done from an arrogant point of view, just I got stuff to do. And I remember asking him what a scale bell is. And he said, what did you say? And I said, a scale bell. What is a scale bell? I had a dream or an intuition. I wanted to, is that a thing? And he paused for a long time. And he went, well, actually it is. It's a very old school mediumship term that talks about the resonance of the soul, okay? Or the, I wouldn't say the signature of the soul, I'd say the sound or the resonance of the soul. And he kind of described it as the Om. So when things like that pop up, they start to open up more and more ideas and realities. The biggest, I guess, insight he gave me was, because I'd ask him all manner of questions about literally everything. Do pets go to heaven? Do this, do that. And he was just, yes. He said, you've got to understand, though, with any spiritual development or spiritual evolution, it's not a quick path and it's not an easy path. It's one that everyone has to walk, but they will walk it very, very slowly. And there's no rush because there's no end result. So it's always when people ask questions, when you have the answers for them, it shouldn't stop them in their tracks. It should bring them to the point of wanting to open up and ask more questions, or lead them to, what does this mean? So that's kind of what I went through. It was an endless array of possibilities. What it sparked in me was, wow, there's more to this life. I knew it. I knew this wasn't quite it. And it got me excited and probably gave me a lot of, not bravado, but a lot of bravery to go against how life was back in the day, in the 90s. For a male to do this in the 90s, when I stepped into this, even in my 20s talking about it, I had a lot of friends and acquaintances, and I'd say acquaintances around me. But when you start to become the truth of who you are, a lot of people disappear like the wind, and you find that the core group of people that you're left with are the ones that are meant to be there. Okay, and it's not like that for everyone, but when you start to step on path, that happens. So yeah, asked an array of questions, from the mundane to what is the soul and what is the soul made of, which is known as perispirit.
Well, I'm curious to know, what are some of the common misconceptions on this path? And perhaps a follow-on question from that is, what do you wish that you yourself had known when starting to deepen down this path?
The common misconceptions. Well, let's look at spirituality and people stepping, which is a very Western way of thinking. Let's be honest about it. So when I say that, I'm like, look, if I was talking to people from other cultures, I wouldn't have to put it that way, because there is a deeper understanding of what is sacred. So sometimes we have it too good. And especially in Australia, sometimes we can be too comfortable. And I mean this in the most loving way, but I guess for people that have really traveled and understand what I'm talking about, there's not enough community in Australia. You can go to other cultures. I remember going, and living in India, I was never on my own. There was never not someone around me. And initially I hated it. But after a while, I realized it was the highest compliment, because you were part of the family. Okay. And we don't always have that sense of community here. So yeah, it's a very Western way of putting it. The misconceptions around mediumship are that mediums are anything special. We're not. It's a trade. Same as a plumber. Okay, that's what it is. Anyone can develop their mediumship, but it's just like saying that anyone can be as good as Eddie Vedder. You're not you're not going to be. So there's different levels of potential and skill set. But you have to work very, very hard for that. So yeah, mediums aren't anything special, and mediums and the spirit world, we shouldn't hold the spirit world on a pedestal, because our loved ones are one step in front of us. Sometimes I'll come through and say, I don't know. Or if I'm bringing through someone's mother, and they will go, well, I want to know, can you ask her whether my partner's right for me or not? And they can't say that. They can't do that for us. That's our own personal choice. There's universal law that everyone has to abide to. That's how it is. It's how the world is governed. So spirit can't do the work for us. They're not allowed to, and they wouldn't do it because it impedes our evolution, good, bad, and indifferent. They can come to help us and inspire us. That's about it. And what was the second question?
Well, it was more so... That's a good question. It slipped my mind.
Totally. we went into that very subdued space with spirit, that passive state of
totally.
of quiet.
No, it's come back to me now. So the question was, what do you wish that you had known upon reflection now, looking back at when you first started walking this path?
That I was going to succeed. Yeah, that I was going to succeed. And I already had every tool within me to succeed. Yeah, because if I knew that, I would have set the world on fire very quickly. But instead, now I'm trying to help people have that passion that they can ignite within themselves so they can change the world. And the consciousness of humanity does need changing. Yeah, I would have done that sooner.
Yeah, you touched on something before, and this is kind of going to weave us into more of the nitty-gritty, I feel. And to touch on some of your offerings, when I had a look on your website, you offer the psychic or intuitive development and mediumship classes from a beginner, an intermediate, and an advanced levels. So I'm curious to know what are, and of course this is kind of getting into the practicalities of the practicalities of it. Yeah. So I guess what are some of the fundamental places to start to develop these intuitive capacities, and how do you see that they generally progress from being a beginner and then going through to an intermediate or an advanced stage? What's the progression look like? What are the differences?
Sure. Again, learning a language. So when we first come in, it's a Trojan horse, which I love. And that Trojan horse is people come in and go, great, I'm going to be learning, intuition. That's going to be fun. I'm going to be learning mediumship. That's fine. And I'm kind of sitting there going, yes, come on in. You'll soon discover. Because in truth, they are aspects of what is happening. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes for people. So I say to students, yeah, you've got a 3-hour class, but you're being taught in the dream state. You're having your guys in spirit come around me. We're sending them healing all the time. We're really helping in terms of their own personal development. What we do is we help people shift and change every week, or attempt to give them hold the space for them to develop and for them to change. Okay. Now they are required to strip away the false layers every class. So they're moving through that conditioned self or limited self. So they can step onto what's known as their blueprint or the potential, their soul's potential that they basically created with what's known as their guardian or guardian spirit before they came to Earth. And that's my role, to get them on their blueprint, to become the best possible version of themselves. Sometimes people will be doing very well and then they choose to be very self-destructive and go off path. And that can happen. Sometimes you see people come in, and I've had students come in that were suicidal when they came in for a reading. And it's interesting, a couple of them were probably the most talented. And from that space of not knowing what they're doing, being off track and really being at that point of, do I stay on this planet or not? They moved to not only getting out of that space to working in the industry and teaching within the industry within 2.5 years. And that's very quick, but there's a lot that's been done. So it is about getting people on that blueprint. When we start off in a beginner's class, it's just the basics of what do you feel, what do you hear, what do you see. But from the word go, we get people to read for each other. And when we have students reading for each other and learning to trust, that's basically what it is, learning that element of trust, getting used to dealing with energy and the intuition, getting used to the disciplines of meditation, because that really, once you start to meditate, it begins to align your chakras, it begins to align your auric field, and allows that universal energy to flow correctly through you. So that's the beginners. Intermediate is a big step up. That's where, we hold them accountable to their disciplines of meditation and managing their energy. Students are no sickness is tolerated. So if students are owning sickness, they're owning that energy. So at a beginner's level, you can have students come in that have got coughs and colds and I can't come in, I'm not feeling well tonight. Through their disciplines and through building their energy and vibration, because that's what it's all about. There's no disease, unless something serious has gone on, they're there without, without any reservation. And they know that that's a must. So that's the strength that they start to develop once they get from a beginners and into an intermediate. Okay, and at an intermediate level, they're expected to sit in a certain posture and hold that posture for, they are sitting on chairs, by the way, they're not in a yoga posture, but that posture they're required to sit in for 3 hours and not move, and they do that to build that will and to build that strength. If they can do it in class, then that filters out to their life. All right, so the discipline is really taught, and with that, it does develop within them the understanding that their mind and their thoughts create reality. So there's a lot more of self-responsibility and awareness around that. And again, with it, they're still moving through their stuff, stripping away the false layers. And then when you go towards the advanced class, that's totally different. That's being of service to spirit. So that's exploring what's known as physical mediumship. So a mental medium is a medium who they will be the only one in the room who is seeing the spirit, and they will pass on to people what they see about that spirit and what they're saying. Where physical mediumship, which is incredibly rare, there's probably 100 people out of the entire population of the planet.
Wow, not many.
Yeah, who are doing it. Yeah, and there are frauds, unfortunately, but the legit physical mediums have a certain makeup. And with that, and I don't mean makeup, energetic makeup, and force or power, and they can produce a substance known as ectoplasm. And from that ectoplasm, which exudes from, can be the solar plexus, can be the mouth, can be from all the orifices, in fact, which is light sensitive, so it does need to be in darkness, but they can exude that and they can build a voice box so spirit can communicate. So everyone in the room can hear spirit, hear their loved ones. They can materialize in full bodies, so they'll be able to walk around and be reunited with their loved ones, even for a few moments. So, there's been recordings of seances that I've listened to, and I've been to probably about 6 physical mediumship seances where it's the most amazing thing you could ever imagine, because you're talking to people from the spirit world and they're talking back. So your fear of death goes like that. And it's always joyous, always lovely. And their advice literally from the horse's mouth is, you know, you'd have to understand that, you know, they're ordinary people, and that the best advice they have in life is just do your best and be happy. That's it. So it's pretty, there's no doom and gloom. There's no punishment. There's no, you have to be a certain way. You know, they're not all about any dogma. It's about you live how you want, you know, but live it peacefully. So yeah, we do sit for physical mediumship. I would never claim to be a physical medium, because I'm not. I'd love to say that, but we sit, and at times there is phenomena that can happen. So we do have, you know, phenomena in the room. So that itself is delving into different states of consciousness, different states of altered states that the students can go into, which allows them to evolve without going into it too much. So that's an invitation only class. So the student has to be incredibly dedicated there for spirit, and be able to handle the energy, because, you know, we've had quite a few people who we've brought them in for class and they've passed out. The energy has been too much for them. So we choose them wisely now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you've mentioned a couple of phrases there. One of which was just handling energy, and also managing energy. And of course, there are parallels here with the path of shamanism, and part of shamanism is all about the path of coming to master energy in all its forms, from the physical or the mental or the emotional, the spiritual. And I guess what I'm picking up here is that to cultivate our sense of intuitive abilities or capacities, then there is a need to be able to become sensitized. So this is what I thought of when you were saying that someone's sitting there for 3 hours on a chair and not moving. Not only are they developing their willpower to be able to sit through that, but they're also becoming very, very sensitive to a lot of the energies that are flowing within and that are flowing without, because this is what I guess intuitive capacities is all about. It's becoming sensitized to all the different energies, and to be able to discern what it is that we're picking up on.
And discerning is the great word. Yeah. Always be discerning, and your own awareness. So it's really simple. If it feels right for you, it is. If it feels wrong for you, then it's wrong for you. So trust those feelings. But yeah, it is about understanding what's going on for our energy. So we do teach people about their energy, meditation, healing too, which is a component that I've missed, which is a huge part of, big part of mediumship. And there are great healers that have walked the planet, where they will literally heal tumors. You know, again, the guy that I studied under he'd left his wife to jump into partnership with another woman, and then, you know, she was diagnosed with I think tumors, and, you know, the doctor said, well, you better get your affairs in order. And he was like, what the hell, you know? And he said to the spirit world, come on, guys, if you want me to work with you, you've got to help fix this, otherwise I'm out. And, you know, he went into an altered state, or a trance state, where there was a doctor, or allegedly a doctor, who came through, and those tumors went. They went. So I have seen it. I do know. I've been part of healing groups where you see people physically change, emotionally change, mentally change, with healing energy, which is simply, probably you'd say, doctors in the spirit world, or healers in the spirit world, impressing their energy upon you through you. So again, just being the vessel for that. And it's vibrational. So it's a higher vibration moving through a lower dimension, or a lower vibration. But it's also color, and color plays a very, very important part in the universe. We are all color. And so, have you ever met someone, you really resonate with them, and you've never met them before, but you're just like, oh man, this is easy. This is how connection should be and friendship should be. And then there's other people where you just feel awkward. It doesn't work, or you just can't stand each other. And they haven't done anything wrong, but you're just like, no. And it's the color which doesn't match. Okay. So to a certain degree, our colors, and the colors that resonate from people, which you learn to develop when you start to develop your clairvoyance, it speaks volumes, because you can understand what those colors are about, but you can see if people are in resonance or not. And you can even see people from one side of the room to the other. Their energy is just like, you've seen snails when they kind of grip onto things. That's what the energy looks like, as weird as it is, sussing each other out. And another great one is, you know, the love heart itself. If you have two people that are perfectly in love, they have that pale, kind of the pink like that. the pale pink, which is real unconditional love. And you have the auric field and the pale pink that moves around them. That's the love heart. And that's where it came from. So if you ever see that, it's the most amazing thing, because you're just like, wow, that's perfect harmony. All right.
Well, I would love to ask then, in your own practice and, well, from your own practice, this is quite evidently what you'll be passing on to others through your teachings. I'm curious to know how you determine or discern what energies to let through at what times, how often, and this is more so within the context of what we were talking about earlier, which is spirit speaking through us. Because I'm also interested to know, or to ask, if there's a proverbial switch that you might energetically turn on or off when you are wanting to engage with spiritual energies, or whether you are doing a reading. Because if someone has loose energetic boundaries, then these particular energies might be coming through constantly, and there may not be able to be that discernment between what is mine, what is all of these other energies outside of myself.
Yeah. It's a really really intelligent question, and important one to ask. So untrained mediums, or people who believe they're mediums and maybe not, but I'd say untrained mediums, will always say, oh, I talk to spirit all the time, 24 hours a day, and they keep me awake all the time and I can't sleep. That's an untrained medium, because we have to work with that power of our mediumship. And I always say to people, I always go, what do you do for work? And I always pause because I'm like, this is either a long-winded conversation, and I'm very mindful of my energy. Before this, we dropped my fiance's car down to get repaired. And just on an energy level, the guy started talking, and I just went, here we go. And from his perspective, he's just trying to tell a story, but it wasn't. It was just taking the energy. And I didn't want to be rude, but I'm like, you know what? He's sucking my will to live. I got to go. So we've got to be a little bit aware of that as well. So it's switching on and switching off. If I'm not working, and we're out and people say, what do you do? And I say, I'm a medium. Every now and then people go, is there anyone around me now? Which is a very annoying thing to ask a medium. But I always say, I'm not plugged in. Don't know. It's as simple as that. And you don't want to be open all the time, because it's like revving your car or redlining your car constantly. It's not going to work. So just like if you were to go and work out, you go work out for that specified time and then you rest, don't you? So your energy is very important to understand. So you always say to people, switch on, switch off, and we teach people how to open up their energy, how to blend with the spirit world. And when you're done, close down and ground yourself. Very, very important. Otherwise, we become very, very unstable. You don't want that. There was another part to that question that I was going to talk about. Your question opened up more ideas for me.
Yeah, well, the question was, how do you discern what energies to let through at what times and how often? And then we were talking about the proverbial switch.
Yeah, cool. You can tell you're talking to a medium, because like, where was I? What was I saying? So
yeah,
that is such a medium. That's my excuse anyway. There's a protocol when dealing with spirits. So we have what's known as our doorkeeper, and they're the ones who really look after us. They're like our bouncer, all right? And you can even try an experiment now where you request your doorkeeper to stand in behind you. If you're sensitive to energy, you will feel a stronger energy or presence around you. So if you give them permission, they'll step right in. What they do is they look after your physical body to make sure you're the only one driving the vehicle. And at the same time, when I'm working with spirit, if I'm doing a public demonstration, say I'm doing a show and there's 100 people, I have to have spirit world in order and coordinated. So that the bouncer is like, next one, next one, next one. So they keep people in order. So your doorkeeper does a lot of that work. If you find that you're going into what's known as trance mediumship, where the consciousness of the discarnate spirit, or those in the spirit world, are blending with your mind, working through your mind, and then kind of getting your mind out the way, getting you into a subdued state. And in some cases, the medium will go into a state which can be similar to sleep, where they don't recall anything. The intelligence of the spirit world and what's known as your spirit control. Okay, your spirit control is like an MC who brings everyone in, and they know what they're doing. So the intelligence of the spirit world to coordinate and to bring in familiar energies for you will always keep that in control. So yeah, you've got to remember there's such great intelligence in the spirit world, and when they're working with mediums, they've got their way of working, their protocol. So it's not here, there, and everywhere. It's very coordinated and organized. But we always have to remember that if we're working with the spirit world, they've got appointment times. So, you know, when you said 11 a.m., spirit were here at 1:45 going, okay, well, we want you to meditate for a little bit. And I was like, really? Okay. And there was reason for that, because they wanted my energy in the right space to be able to talk to you and for them to be able to be with us today. And as much as I'm not allowing my mind to get influenced or impressed by spirit, because then it'll take us off on a different tangent, they're definitely around.
Yeah, I've heard various people with psychic abilities talk about the various qualities or faculties, or perhaps that's not the best way to language it, actually. Like, people say that we each have a predominant extrasensory mode of perception, such as what is termed clairvoyance or clairaudience. So my question here is, how do you typically encourage people to tune into what their primary skill here might be?
Yeah, again, really intelligent question. So yeah, you got it right, because we're dealing with the faculties at times of the mind with what's known as our levels of perception. So our clairsentience, clear feeling, clairaudience, which is clear hearing, and clairvoyance, which is clear seeing, which you spoke about. They need to be developed and understood. So if I was teaching a one-day workshop, I'll take people through exercises where they practiced on each level or tuned in, and when they discovered which was a lot easier for them. And that's their natural level. That's a natural skill set. It's almost finding out, you know, are you right-handed or left-handed? Okay. So once you find that you have that skill set, that's great. They will excel at that. My job is to bring all of those levels into alignment. So when I started, clairvoyance was everything. And the various teachers that I worked with would get me to work on a clairaudient level, which I couldn't. And I cracked it every time. I even left a class once, got Sangha left. Just cracked it like a child. And I think they were still laughing the next week when I came back. They were just like, I've never seen anyone, you know, throw a tantrum like that. And now the clairaudient side of things, so here in the spirit world, is one of my greatest strengths. So what we see as our weaknesses, we want to make those elements or faculties, as you really put it, quite well-rounded.
Do you notice that there is an extrasensory mode of perception that is more prevalent or perhaps more common within the spectrum of the collective?
Most people will start off on, you can tell by their language. So if people say, oh yeah, I feel, what's their clairsentience? If they're kind of going, oh yeah, I know this, it's a clairaudience. If they're going, I see it this way, it's their clairvoyance. Usually you'll find it will be their clairsentience. So people usually feel, especially people that are sensitive. Okay. The language okay is clairaudient. So there's the spirit world slowly influencing on me. I could just tell as I'm listening to them, but not aware that I was listening to them. It's usually that clairsentience. So when you feel it deeply. And again, it's, do you feel that someone, do you feel good after talking with someone, or do you feel drained? Do you feel funny when you go into a certain environment? Yeah. So it's always that clairsentience. So, and you've got to remember that with people that are really, really sensitive, and I guess people that would say is empaths, which is a very, you know, again, kind of pop word now. Most of it is the clairsentience that they're picking up on. But with people that are very, very, very sensitive and emotionally sensitive, you have to watch during this, because they can be taken off path, because they take on everything, and they can have a lot of clutter within their auric field that isn't theirs. So if you don't know what you're doing and you're a little bit too open and you're around a lot of negative people, you'll feel negative. If you've had conversation with someone and their emotions were feeling very depressed, you'd feel depressed. But what a lot of people can do is not only feel depressed for a little bit, they keep that and they live that in their life. So they believe that depression is theirs. So you know, we sometimes have to, the word discerning that you've been using is a really, really good word to bring into people's vocabulary. And everyone will ask, well, how do I know what's mine and what's someone else's, which is really good. It's a question to ask as well. You have to know yourself really well. You have to know your body really well. You have to know who you are really well. So it teaches you that self-awareness. But always say, if you're feeling switched out of nowhere, if your mood's switched out of nowhere for no reason, if your thoughts have gone into the negative, don't own it. You're picking up on energy.
Yeah, so something that I have picked up on, and maybe you will share similar sentiments here, or maybe they might be completely different, is that when we're talking about developing our psychic or intuitive capacities or mediumship, and maybe this is one of the misconceptions too, is that it can be very much not confined, but I guess found within these spiritual states of consciousness or altered states of consciousness or the spirit world, kind of something outside of ourselves. But when we're talking about developing these skills or these skills, or I keep using the word capacities, then it seems like the work that needs to be done is really, it's not as, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but it's not quite as like extravagant or like I don't know if you have a better word for it, but it's really quite more, it's a lot more grounded. It's about coming to know ourselves on a very basic kind of fundamental level, and that in one sense can actually seem quite boring. It's like work on yourself on all of the levels, come to develop your self-awareness on the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual levels. And it's through through building, cultivating that self-awareness in these many different aspects, then these intuitive skills will start to blossom.
It's exactly how it is. And cleaning up the language that at times I'd use with people, it's that no nonsense attitude, because when we start to deal with ourselves, it gets rid of delusion and it gets rid of the ego really, really quickly. Okay. Now our ego and survival self is needed there to keep us alive. That's why it's there. But when we go into being egotistical or a bit of delusion, we're not going to get anywhere, are we? We're not going to evolve in that. So you get humbled very, very quickly. And I still do it now, where I get my students to come and read for me in a class, and you'll always choose the good ones, and they tear strips off you. And I just sit there and go, thank you very much. And it's good for the students to see, because they will look at their teacher and at times they will go, oh, we'll put you on a pedestal. And I'm like, no, the pedestal doesn't exist. So don't create that. Yeah. So it's exactly as you said, you've got to do that work, and you can't hide from the truth. Everyone's got their issues to deal with. And you have to deal with it. So I ask a simple question, and it really answers a lot. And this isn't me trying to be clever or trying to be rude, but I'll ask you a question. Where do you see me?
Where do I see you? Well, the obvious question that comes to mind. I mean, my philosophical mind kind of runs in reels here, and it's like, how many different ways can I answer that question?
I know.
Where do I see you? Well, I see you in front of me on the computer screen is my very kind of two-dimensional answer.
And you did really well, because I know your mind was wanting to go off into everything. How we see and view people is through our own lens. So it's internally. And because everything is subjective, everyone in the world sees things differently. We have to at times move through, I guess, the tainted lenses, which is our bias and prejudice, but which is our conditioned self, to see things as it is and see ourselves as it is. So when we're looking to develop ourselves, we have to be with us. And the observation of self is really, really important. And it's never complex. No great spiritual teachings are ever complex. It's very simple, always. What's the truth in this situation? So that's why I ask people that, not to try to sound clever, but we see everyone within our own mind.
Yeah, no, it's a great question and a great point of reflection to see how many ways that we can start to tease apart that and answer that and perceive through that lens. And the reason that particular question came, or those reflections came to me, was I was thinking that listeners that are tuning into our conversation, and listeners that are tuning into any podcast conversation, towards the end of the podcast, there's always, it's like, okay, give us like the 1, 2, 3 steps that we can do right now that we can implement to develop whatever skills or to go down whatever path that we're talking about. And it's a question that I almost want to lay forth, and I will. Like, what are the 1, 2, 3 steps that people can do coming away from this conversation? But at the same time, it's so much more complex than that, because there are so many interwoven levels to reality and to life that we need to be working on.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And it's good to have that inquisitiveness and that excitement for life and excitement to learn, because that gets us excited about the possibilities. You know, you asked, what would I kind of go back and tell myself I wish I had known? But I always said, if you knew you couldn't fail, then what would you do? And, succeed. You wouldn't hold yourself back. But to explore life and to make the most of life and to get that childlike wonderment back is the best state to be in. Always be like the kids and the animals. And it sounds, again, kind of corny, but to be in that state allows us to be free. At times our intellect gets in our own way. I would say start off with meditation. Let meditation start to guide you in your own development. Meditation can be going for a run. Meditation can be listening to music. Meditation can be knitting, any kind of repetitive action. But if you sit for about 15 or 20 minutes in meditation, I always encourage people to do it for one day. And if you can do it for one day, you can do it for two. Do it for two, you can do it for a week. If you get to a week, you're doing well, you can do it for two. So I always say, if you get to a month of meditation, then try to get to 90 days of continuous meditation, however long. And at that point, there will be a very big shift within your consciousness, your state of being, and your overall health and well-being, because your vibration would have found its balance. So it's the inquisitiveness and wonderment of life that I would encourage people to get back into, because it's fun. The spirit world are not serious. They don't come through with any religious dogma and everyone has to act a certain way. No, they come through being very, very lighthearted. And if anyone's ever had the experience of having a session with me, I laugh a lot. And why I laugh a lot is it raises the vibration. I can be silly during that, even when I teach, but the heart is totally open because the spirit world is coming through. So that wonderment is important. Meditation is really important. Mm-hmm. And the third, look at what you want to change within yourself and your life. Yeah, look at what you want to change and why. Because when we look at what we want to change simply because we're wanting to evolve, then we get a lot clearer in terms of where we're going and what we can achieve in our life. So sometimes if people don't know where they're going, just look at the self and look at what you want to change and know that you can change. If there's to be a fourth, and I have to say this is probably Spirit's influence, because there's just been an individual pop in very quickly, it's never give up. Yeah, never give up. And I'm not always I've been the worst example of that in my past. I'm like, no, that's hard. And I can still do that. But there's no point to giving up, because we have to start again. So never give up. And I suppose if there's anyone out there who needs to hear this as well, it doesn't matter where you're at this point in time. Tomorrow can be an entirely different reality. And the choices that you make that are positive for yourself can not only change your life, it can help change other people's that you haven't met yet. So for me, I decided to change my life and I was helped in that. In fact, I had my life saved, and I really did. That allowed me to decide to live my life, change my life, take responsibility for it. By doing that, I've been able to teach and help people for a decade now get on path and get on track. So our choices are very powerful.
Yeah, I love that answer. Yeah, I want to be mindful of your time, but I've also got a couple of questions I'd love to run by you if you have the time yourself, mate.
Go for it. All good.
Well, we've kind of been talking about cultivating these skills within ourselves, but I'd love to know, or I'd love to ask about reading. So what does a reading look like for you when you're giving a reading to someone else? Is it ritualized in any manner? Give us the ins and outs.
Yeah, just discipline. It's disciplined and hard work. That's basically what it is. Because it does involve my vibration becoming a lot higher. So now it's very subdued. if I'm doing a private reading, even before and why I have my own space is so I can be left alone, because I'll be like a raging bull before that reading with my energy. And it's a nervous excitement that's there, but it's spirit working on my vibration. Okay. And they'll do that, not with everyone, but they do that. A psychic reading, which talks about people's life direction, I sit and prepare for that. So I sit and note the information down before they come in. So I'll have the reading prepared. And basically, I'll go through that reading with them, talk about all areas of their life. When you're having readings with someone, they shouldn't be asking a lot of questions. That's what's known as a cold reading. They should be telling you. If I'm unsure of something, I'd say, hey, were you thinking about this? Does this make sense? Can you place this information? And you just get people to say yes or no. So the reader must do the work. The reader must be specific. You know, when people kind of go, no, you've got to learn to love yourself. Well, in what way, how, why? So being very, very specific with that. But there's usually a theme that people are going through. And so whatever that theme is will play out in all areas of their life. And I try to give them the guidance that they need. I always say to people that I can't pull any punches with readings. I can't hold back information. I can't embellish. And I wouldn't do that. So it's best to be direct and to the point and very specific. And if it's good, bad, or indifferent, pass on that information, but be honest with people. That's what a reading looks like. And it can go for half an hour or an hour. So usually if it's a half hour, 25 minutes, I'll be talking, then I'll stop and give them time to ask questions. The questions should have been answered anyway. But if they're not, they can ask that. But the readings, and you've noticed, you asked about this and that energy of the readings coming in, where you'll find I'm talking a bit quicker, and that's what it will be like during a reading, where you'll have the reading. You should have them talking at 100 miles an hour and being very, very specific, not waffling on, and that allows a higher energy and vibration to come through. So that's the psychic side of things. Mediumship is providing proof of survival of the soul. So if someone's grandmother comes through describing how they looked, who they were, shared memories, okay, and then anyone else who wants to come through, and their messages if they've got any. So kind of two different readings there that a lot of people don't understand sometimes. So I have to explain to people they're two very different ones. The mediumship reading's a lot harder.
Yeah, sure. Well, when we're talking about readings, I guess it brings up those threads of skepticism that you mentioned yourself at the start of the conversation. What's one of the common ones, such as like psychic readers or mediums having access to information about the person that they're reading before conducting a session. That's like a common criticism, as are many others. So I guess I'm curious how you kind of deal with those kind of criticisms or skepticism when others kind of put that forth.
Encouraged. Be skeptical, that's fine. Just don't be cynical. Don't be cynical. So, probably when I first started, if I had someone that was difficult, I would really struggle with them, where now there's no problem. You maybe kind of carve that out. The proof's in the pudding. And some people may sit there and go, no. And you're like, okay, I'll leave that with you. And then 3 weeks later, they send you an email going, well, actually it did happen and this happened, so thank you for it. So you've got to trust. So if I was doing readings and I hadn't trained for the amount of time that I've trained, then, I would be open to saying that maybe I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing because I've invested so much in it. That's where I'm comfortable with that. Just on that, mediums have access to information. I can still have people book in on the same day. So if they book in an hour before, how am I going to get information on them? And I suppose you could go on ancestry.com and find something about their relatives. How do I know about their personal life? If I'm doing a mediumship show or a demonstration, a public demonstration where I go to a spiritualist church or something like that, and the people turn up and it's not charged, so no one's given their information, how do I know the specific details of their relatives? So that's where I'd question that. But there should be healthy skepticism with anything. I've seen fraud in mental mediumship and physical mediumship. Went to a seance once and the guy got outed as a fraud. So he should. I won't say his name, but it was a very infamous and famous moment in mediumship circles. And he was running around in his undies, tapping people on the head. And I was there with the rest of them, me and my fiance clapping away. It was only the next day that I was like, hang on a minute. It just didn't seem quite right. So skepticism is fine. I always say, just because I say it doesn't make it right, but it's, I'm trying to help people. That's it. Otherwise, the prices would be through the roof, and they're not through the roof. They're enough. I believe I'm as good as the amount that I charge, but it's not crazy. They're not crazy prices. So yeah, if I was in it to make a lot of money, which you won't as a medium. So if anyone's out there thinking that they can get into it for that, good luck. Doesn't happen.
Totally. Yeah, well, this has been great chatting to you, Benjamin. I've really enjoyed hearing your perspective on all this and learning a few bits and pieces myself. But before we start to wind things up, is there anything that I haven't asked that you would love to talk about or touch on yourself that might be important that we haven't touched on? And also, as a follow-on from that, I would love for you to speak about some of your offerings that you're putting out as well, so people can reach out and contact you.
Yeah,
if
thanks
they wish
for that.
to.
Yeah, totally. If it feels right. I guess, the understanding of what the spirit world is. As a medium, I've got a responsibility to be the voice of the spirit world. And when people come in for readings, I'm dealing with their loved ones. So we recently, it was my auntie's funeral, and she was special needs, and it impacted everyone because she was always very, very funny. The way that she was sent off by the people at the funeral place was with such reverence. And I kind of went, oh, that's how it has to be when you're dealing with people's loved ones. The penny finally dropped. And so that's really interesting that when spirit comes through, that very loving energy and reverence, I think, and that love, which it doesn't die, it grows stronger because the spirit worlds are much more amplified. So the emotions are greater in the spirit worlds. So their love grows for us. Spirit world's not out to hurt us. Spirit world is around us. And they've never left us. The distance between you and spirit is a thought. So if you're thinking about your loved ones, it's because they're there. Okay, so we always say it's the spirit world's all around us. It really is all around us. So yeah, don't ever be afraid of anything to do with spirit. It's fine to be discerning, but remember, it's meant to be a sacred. We started on that, a sacred connection and a sacred union between the two worlds. And that's what I would try to offer in a very light-hearted and at times humorous way. And I always say to people, it's fine to be skeptical. If I've gone wrong at all, then I'll have to face it and face myself in spirit world. You can't escape your karma. So I'm well aware of that. The offerings are, I offer readings, psychic readings, mediumship readings, classes, and workshops, probably more in towards the end of this year, I think, when it opens up, and next year we'll start to run them again. And maybe some events as well. And also spirit art, which I haven't spoken about. So spirit art is when a medium will go into a slight trance state and at times draw your relatives or draw your guides. I don't think I've got any hanging up at the moment. But yeah, I offer that as well, and spirit art classes, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've seen that on your website, the spirit portraits.
Yeah, spirit portraits. Thank you. Yeah. Spirit portraits, which for me, it's not work. I love it. And the guy who taught me does it with his eyes closed, which I'm still trying to do and I can't. So that's really cool when you're able to do a full portrait, and people can do it in a workshop in an altered state. And you can, I've done portraits in about 12 minutes or so. So they come through such a fast vibration. So that side of things is fun, and that's a great joy.
That's really interesting. Yeah. So the classes, they're all in-person classes at this stage. So we're waiting for the kind of lockdown restrictions to ease up so that you can have that face-to-face interaction, or do you offer the virtual classes of any description as well?
Yeah, they're online at the moment. So all 2 classes. It's very hard to run physical mediumship remotely because it's physical. But the other side of things, yeah, we've got the 2 classes that are virtual at the moment. As soon as it opens, we'll be back in there again. So people are more than welcome to look online. We've also got a lovely tutor, Eloise, who is up and coming, who I'm mentoring, who's got a lot of talent. So yeah, she's also running classes on Tuesdays, I think.
Yeah, great. So I will have the link to your website in the show notes to this episode, but do you just want to drop it here as well, just in case people want to punch it in straight away?
Yeah, really cool. It's just benjaminvenes.com. So Benjamin, VENES.com.
Perfect. All right, brother. Well, that was a fun time having
Yeah, it
this
was
chat.
awesome. Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah.
It was great chatting with you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Yeah, thanks for coming on. So have you got any final words that you'd like to leave myself or the listeners with, whether it's coming from you or whether it's coming through spirit? Any words of wisdom?
I don't know if it's wisdom, my own ego or spirit, to be honest with you. But with everything that's going on the planet, think for yourself. Yeah, think for yourself, because there is elements of control that are stepping in into the consciousness of the planet, and there's a little bit of a fight for thought and free thought at the moment. And I would even go as far as saying Julian Assange is a part of that, whatever people think of him. So that's an important case that is should be brought to light, but also I would say think for yourself.
Yeah, great words, mate.